Ahoy! There was a very crucial change in the most recent New World patch that you can probably use to make some gold or some coin either now or down the road, and there's already been a very important change to PvP in the PvP free-for-all zone as well, which we should talk about since it kind of changes things a little bit but not fully. So let's begin with the change that actually affects your gold and your crafting as well. There was a change in the patch notes that announced that certain craft mods would now be available from expeditions, from mutated expeditions that were previously only available through caches, through crafting, through aptitude, and those were now added to the loot pool for the mutated dungeons. But it actually went well beyond that in that the drop rates were adjusted, and they were adjusted quite significantly. So here you can see my haul from a single M2 run. That was just this one run, and that was enough to give me quite a few valuable, or maybe already less valuable craft mods. And that seems to be the general case for any expedition runs that you're doing at the moment, any mutated expedition runs. Some of the craft mods affected by this are Heavy Metal Conglomerate, which is Sundering stacks, very sought after, Hardened Crystal for Enchanted Ward, Soulheart Alternator for Vital Synergy, Adamant for Health, and all of the craft mods for Slash, Strike, and Thrust Conditioning. So craft mods that are generally considered rare, at least according to their labels. And those are all dropping at a frequency of usually getting around 1 per run, sometimes more, of course, if you're lucky, not always guaranteed all of them, but definitely enough to get a reasonable stack fairly quickly. Now, things like this have happened in New World before. There used to be a time where if you ran expeditions, mutated expeditions specifically, you would get all the named world drops very easily. Only lasted a couple days, but if you're running in those days, you were just drowning in them, and most people started scrapping this because there were too many. We also had a thing where low-level expeditions or low mutation expeditions were a very easy way to farm high gear score very quickly, right after 700 gear score came out. So things like this are not completely new and maybe sometimes at least somewhat intentional, but it is also not uncommon for the devs to dial back on those changes, which happened in both cases. So this drop rate that we're seeing at the moment is one that may or may not last into the future, since obviously they want to keep a certain value to these craft mods as well. And especially Heavy Metal Conglomerate is one of those where it's very interesting how far down it will go. Because it's going to be so much more available now. And yeah, this is something you can, of course, on one hand use to simply farm things, but on the other hand you can also use this in order to buy up some of the craft mods that you personally value and think will hold their value into Season 10, and then just hold on to them. If you find this tip useful, consider subscribing and clicking the bell. Also, a big thanks to Klrsyst for being the one who made me aware of this, and of course I posted this on my Patreon Discord as well. I would normally post this on my Patreon too, but my Patreon is bugged at the moment, but those are the kinds of tips you can expect on my Patreon. And now that there are things to talk about in New World again, things that are relevant for trades, I will keep you updated there more as well again. Now let's move on to the other change, and that is to the PvP free-for-all zone in Cutlass Keys. There have been a lot of complaints about how the new curse works, because effectively, due to the debuff that stacks on you, it's very, very easy to get third-partied, because you might be fighting someone else and you get an equal amount of debuff stacks on you because the fight goes on for a while, but then someone else comes in that doesn't have any debuff stacks and suddenly deals a ton of damage to you, and you don't really have a way of fighting back on an even level. And that is something that is very, very difficult to fully balance, but they are introducing a first set of changes that they think might help with this. So there is a slower build-up time of the curse itself. The first stack now is after 120 seconds, and additional stacks will be after 90 seconds each. So quite a while, but obviously fights in New World can go much, much longer than that. The decay is 20 seconds per stack. That is, of course, much more significant. There's a relatively short amount of time. But this also means that any one grouping can benefit from the same decay as well. So makes it weird again. The maximum stacks is reduced to 6, and killing a player now removes 3 stacks. This is also again a bit difficult because it also helps anyone who's grouping, because if they're killing someone while grouping, they can use that to remove half their stacks every time. So yeah, not quite sure how to best solve that, but it does seem difficult. And then there's also reduced detection radius. I'm assuming that is the radius in which you even get the debuff or the curse in the first place. If this will be good or bad is another question, because it's unclear how that would affect 2 ranged players teaming that are a bit further away from each other, for example. So it's difficult. It's not going to be a full solution. They're saying that this means that 1v1 and small group fights will be much less affected overall, and there will be more time to engage in combat before the curse builds up, and there will be a faster recovery when moving away from groups. But they're also saying they're continuing to monitor these changes to ensure they improve your gameplay experience. I don't know what to make of this. I don't know if there is a way in which this can be enough. And I think overall there's still bigger difficulties with the free-for-all zone that will basically mean you can pretty much never fully prevent teaming, because games that have similar systems and can at least almost prevent this kind of stuff from happening, like Albion Online, have significantly more systems around that. I think it's random spawn locations, for example. It's the players not being identifiable by anything, not like name or any of that kind, but also not by their skins or anything. So visually you can't really tell players apart well. There's a lot of stuff that you really need to do in order to prevent teaming. I thought that Dune Awakening did that relatively well. It wasn't really utilized much, but you don't really have any information about other players that you're fighting unless you're like hovering right over them, and you can only see your own teammates in your party. So if there was no party, you wouldn't be able to tell what's going on and who's who. So you have to be very careful with that, and that's just not the case in New World. It's just a lot easier to team under various circumstances, and that I don't think will be changed through the curse changes alone, even though I think this is a good step, and hopefully they just continue taking it in that direction. I also don't know how much they really fully want to prevent grouping. They have mentioned in the past that they're okay with some degree of grouping, I guess. So it might just be that they're just trying to make it a little bit harder. I would hope for maybe a mechanic that's included somehow that makes it so that while you're in combat with another player and consistently staying in combat with another player, you have less build-up as long as you're dealing maybe a significant enough amount of damage. Not so that you can just run around with a teammate and like constantly poke each other a tiny bit, but rather just something that indicates that's enough to be in an actual fight, because as long as that's happening, you shouldn't really be stacking, in my opinion. But even that couldn't necessarily prevent everything if you consider that somebody could be kiting very well and just not taking damage, for example. So difficult situation, difficult to fully solve, but I appreciate they're taking some steps here. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more like it, then consider subscribing and clicking the bell. And if you'd like to support me further, you can do so on my Patreon. Thanks to my patrons who do exactly that, and thank you for watching. Klrsyst, out.